This is the best Wicked God deck you will ever come across, and I actually mean that because I don't think I have ever seen a successful Evil God deck until now. Check this out. So if you want to see this deck in action, be sure to check out the previous video in which I showcased this deck by clicking the card above. But let's get right into this. So this deck actually came about because I made a mistake in the reading of God Slime, and I didn't read the fact that by tributing a level 10 Aqua monster with 0 attack, I missed the 0 attack part. I knew that in my head, I just forgot about it, and so I went, oh, what are some level 10 Aqua monsters, and discovered the Tistinas, which are level 10 Aqua monsters with not 0 attack. But they do have a trap monster which does have level 10 Aqua monster 0 attack, which is fantastic. But that's not important because the Tistinas are insanity, and these guys can very easily get out 3 tributes. So to start off with this deck, we have 3 copies of the Devil's Avatar, 2 copies of the Devil's Dreadroot, and 1 copy of the Devil's Eraser. We only have 1 copy of Eraser. Eraser is the worst of the Wicked Gods. Eraser's attack points are determined by our opponent, which makes it not very good, and its effect is that when it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, it destroys all cards on the field. Now, this effect can definitely be useful, and it is good to have it, especially if our opponent swarms the field. We're going second. The Eraser might be a good choice to have on hand for an absolutely powerful monster. But its effect can also be a detriment. If we're going first and we summon this card, our opponent just has to summon 1 monster with more than 1,000 attack, and it dies and our whole board is wiped. They basically, just do that one card that I forgot the name of. The point is, the Wicked Eraser is not so good. The Devil's Dreadroot, however, is a lot better. With 4,000 attack and defense, it is the only Wicked God that has a determined amount of attack and defense, and it halves the attack of all other monsters on the field. This card is very, very strong and definitely a great beat stick for the OTKs. In fact, most Wicked God decks run this at 3 and the others at 2, but I hard disagree with this. I think that the Devil's Avatar is meant to be the most powerful. The Devil's Avatar will always be the strongest monster on the field with 100 more attack than the strongest monster on the field, and when it is normal summoned, your opponent cannot activate spells and traps for 2 of their turns. If you get this out on your first turn, which is very, very easy with this deck, your opponent can't activate spells or traps for their next 2 turns. So for their first 2 turns, they can't play any spells or traps, which is incredible. The Devil's Avatar is easily the best of the Wicked Gods, and we want to see this in our opening hand, which is why we run it at 3. Next, for our Tistina engine, we have 1 copy of Crystal God Tistina. This, we only really have Crystal God because it enables the effect of Demigod, and that is another part of the strategy, but we don't need more than 1 of them since he is searchable, and you can't special summon him with his own effect, like he doesn't have an effect to special summon him, so you have to summon it with a different effect. So 1 copy of Crystal God. Then we have 3 copies of Demigod of the Tistina. Demigod can be special summoned by its own effect if you control a Tistina card, that being spell, trap, or monster. If you control any Tistina card, you can special summon this card from your hand. That makes it really, really good for tribute fodder for the Wicked Gods. Also, when this card is special summoned, you can add 1 Tistina spell or trap from your deck to your hand, which is, again, a really, really great effect. This card searches for any of our spells and traps, which can help us set up for a Wicked God. It can special summon itself, which is great, and it has a quick effect. If you control the Crystal God Tistina, you can change as many monsters your opponent controls to face down defense position. Then you can send all face-up cards your opponent controls to the graveyard. This effect is incredible. This is what makes Tistina so good. It is the Book of Moon on legs archetype. Demigod Tistina can shut down all of our opponent's monsters, but we need the regular God Tistina in order to do that. Now, Crystal God Tistina has the same effect, but it's not a quick effect. During your main phase, you can change as many monsters your opponent controls as possible to face down defense position. Then you can send all face-up cards your opponent controls to the graveyard. And if this card in its owner's position is destroyed by a card, you can change as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, and it just does the same thing. So these 2 cards are incredible and shut down all our opponent's effects. If you get both of these out on your field, along with the Devil's Avatar, your opponent can't do anything, pretty much. Like, they can summon something, and then we put it face down. So the benefit of having our opponent's monsters face down is 1, they can't attack, 2, they're not counted as what they are, and 3, they can't activate their effects while they're face down. Now, if an effect activates on normal summon, that effect will most likely go through, but if you flip it face down as soon as something is summoned, and they can't activate their effect now, that's a really good, that is insane. That's incredible power. Next up for the Tistinas, we have 1 copy of Hound of the Tistina. Most Tistina decks will run 3 copies of Hound, as he is the setup for the Tistina OTK. Of course, we're not running a Tistina OTK, this isn't a Tistina deck, this is a Wicked God deck. The reason we run 1 copy of Hound, though, is because he can be special summoned from your hand or graveyard if you control a light Tistina monster, that being your demigod or your regular god. So this card basically gives us, we can send it to the graveyard, gives us another tribute very easily. So that's why we have 1 of him, and we send it to the graveyard. We have a few cards to do that. Next, we have 3 copies of Sentinel of the Tistina. Sentinel is this is our starter card, basically. Just like Hound, when this card is in your hand and graveyard and you control a light Tistina monster, you can special summon this card, which is fantastic. Makes for great tribute fodder, even makes for great link fodder, because you can just keep bringing it back. It's really good like that. And its second effect is that you can target a Tistina monster, or 1 face-down card you control, destroy it, and then add 1 Tistina card from your deck to your hand. This includes himself, so you can normal summon him, destroy him, and add your demigod, or rather, you would actually add your, continuous spell. Breath of the Tistina is what you would normally add with that. And yeah, that just really gets your combo going. And then, of course, he can come back once you summon your demigod, which is fantastic. Next up, we have 2 copies of Fallen of the Tistina. Fallen of the Tistina is one of the newer Tistina cards and is actually very useful. You can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard to place 1 Divine Domain Bar Tistina from your deck face up on your field zone. So Bar Tistina is our field spell, and it helps us get out our Crystal God Tistina. We have a lot of cards that can add that to our hand, so we only need 2 copies of Fallen, and Bar Tistina isn't one of the main cards in our strategy for summoning the evil god, so we don't need it that much anyway. It's better for when you're going second to have the field spell. But this card has another effect. If a face-up Tistina spell or trap you control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card, special summon 1 light Tistina monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So this is another way to get out our Crystal God or our Demigod, which is just fantastic, and it also gets our field spell, so you definitely gotta run at least one of these. That's all for the Tistina monsters. Now let's go into the Kashtira engine. So we have a very basic Kashtira engine, which actually goes really hard in this deck. So we have 2 copies of Kashtira Unicorn, 2 copies of Kashtira Fenrir, and 1 copy of Kashtira Rise Heart. That's the monsters. Then for the spells, we have 2 copies of Pressured Planet Wraithsoft, 1 copy of Kashtira Theosis, and 1 copy of Kashtira Birth. This is our other opening, so if we get one of either Unicorn or Fenrir, then this is how we're gonna open. So you special summon your Unicorn, then you use Unicorn's effect to add 1 Kashtira spell card from your deck to your hand. So with that effect, you would probably grab your Kashtira Theosis, and Kashtira Theosis lets us special summon a different Kashtira from our deck with a different attribute. So you would use this card to then special summon your Fenrir. Then you can use Fenrir's effect to add a Kashtira monster from your deck to your hand, which would grab your Kashtira Rise Heart. Now Rise Heart has the effect that if you control a Kashtira monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And just like that, just by opening Kashtira Unicorn, and that alone, you have 3 tributes and can go into your first Wicked God. And then you can even continue playing your Tistina plays. This deck is crazy. This is insane. So the Kashtira engine, there are other ways to start it. You might start with Fenrir, in which case you would add your Rise Heart to the hand, or your Unicorn, or just, it depends on what you grab. You might have Pressured Planet, which lets you add a monster. That's another starter. You might have Kashtira Birth, which lets you normal summon level 7 monsters without tributing and special summon them from that are banished or in your graveyard. These cards just help get the strategy going. But almost always, you are very likely to open with this Kashtira opening and get free Kashtiras out on the field. Then if you have a Wicked God, you can go into that. Otherwise, you can go into one of your Xyz monsters. So the Kashtira engine in this deck is very, very strong, and it works so well and supports the Tistinas, especially if you're going first, because Tistinas work better going second, Wicked Gods work better going first, Kashtiras go first, we like going first. Finally, for our monster lineup, we have 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring because you gotta have your Ash Blossom. Now for the spells. First, we have some basic floodgates, going second. Tistinas are often a going second deck. Change of Heart is a really good card for that. Also gives us another card to tribute for our Wicked Gods. 1 copy of Monster Reborn. Again, bringing cards back from the graveyard. This makes it very easy to summon our Crystal God Tistina. We send him to the graveyard, reborn him back, and it can also give us tribute fodder. 1 copy of Terraforming to get our field spell. 1 copy of Call by the Grave because Ash Blossom is very painful to us. And so is Droll and Lockbird. In fact, we might even want to include cross-out designators as well, just to really help this deck. It depends if you want to be more competitive or not, but I felt that I'd run out of space. If you want to swap out a Dreadroot and maybe an Avatar, then you could swap out those for double Noblemen, but up to you, depends what you want to do. Next, for our final Tistina lineup, we have 3 copies of Play of the Tistina. This card is actually really good, and I think a lot of people disregarded it when it came out. This card's effect special summons 1 Tistina monster from our hand or graveyard in defense position, and returns it to the hand during the end phase. Now that might not sound good, except that it is a quick play spell, meaning that we can send our Crystal God Tistina to the graveyard with our field spell's effect, and then during our opponent's turn, we can use Play of the Tistina to special summon it to the field, enabling the effect of our Demigod. That is what makes Play of the Tistina so good in this deck. Plus, it also sets up for our Xyz monster, or just for extra tribute fodder. Next, we have 3 copies of Breath of the Tistina. This is one of our main searcher cards. It is one of our opening cards, and it is probably one of the best cards to start with in this deck for multiple reasons. This card is crazy in the Evil God deck. During your main phase, you can normal summon 1 Tistina monster in addition to your normal summon or set. I shouldn't have to tell you that that really helps with getting out God cards. We need that, right? Its second effect is that you can target 1 face-up monster you control, or if you control a light Tistina monster, you can target 1 face-up monster on the field instead, including our opponent's monster. Change that monster to face-down defense position, then add 1 Tistina card from your deck to your hand. So with this card, normally the play is that we would go Sentinel into Breath, or Breath into Sentinel, and then we would use the other one to get our Demigod, special summon the Demigod with its own effect, and then add Divine Domain or Play of the Tistina from our deck to the hand. That's the main play of this deck. Then we would bring back our Sentinel because we destroyed it with its own effect, and that gets us out 2 monsters. Then use our field spell to either send Crystal God or Hound, depending on what we've got, and then you can special summon the Hound with his own effect, or you set up for Play of the Tistina by having God in the graveyard. So that is the main play of this deck, and that is how we easily get 3 tributes out with the Tistina engine. Plus, Breath of the Tistina gives us an extra normal summon. So if we have that first, we can then use that to extra normal summon our Sentinel, and then summon our Avatar when we've got the 3 tributes set up. So definitely want to see this card in our hand. Next, we have 2 copies of Divine Domain. Again, if you're running a pure Tistina deck, 3 copies of Divine Domain would definitely be necessary, but since we're running the God variant, we only run 2 copies of Divine Domain. Divine Domain's effect is that you can, during the main phase, send 1 Tistina monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then, if your opponent controls 3 or more face-up cards, you can special summon 1 Crystal God Tistina from your hand or deck. You can only use this effect once per turn, and if this card in your field spell zone is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon 1 Tistina monster from your deck or graveyard. So, normally, Divine Domain Tistina is the main way in which we're going to go into your Crystal God if you're running a normal Tistina deck. But it also acts as a really great way to send God to the graveyard so we can bring him back with play if we're going first. Play of the Tistina makes Tistinas able to go first, which is really, really good. This is why Tistinas normally have to go second, but now we can go first with Play of the Tistina, which is fantastic. Plus, it allows us to send our Hound to the graveyard so we can bring him back for the extra tribute. But since it is so searchable, since we've got Fallen of Tistina, Terraforming, Breath and Demigod, and even Sentinel can all search this card, we don't really need to see it in our hand. 2 is plenty enough. Finally, to wrap up, we have 1 copy of Signs of the Tistina. This card special summons itself as a level 10 Aqua monster with 0 attack and 0 defense. It does have a pretty cool effect as well. If you would like to read that, it can be fodder, not fodder, but just back up to destroy one of our opponent's monsters. but overall it's not that fantastic of an effect, and we mainly just use it to tribute for our God Slime. Speaking of God Slime, straight to the extra deck. We have one copy of Egyptian God Slime. We only need one copy of it. This card is treated as 3 tributes, so we can use this to summon any of our wicked gods just by tributing this card using Signs of the Tistina to summon it in the first place. We have one copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, one copy of Garura Wings of Resonant Life, and one copy of Mud Dragon of the Swamp. These cards are all super poly targets, right? They get rid of, you know, just anything that we don't like going against. I am aware that we don't have Super Poly in our main deck, but we have it in our side deck. So why are we wasting extra deck space on these? Basically, Tistinas don't need the extra deck. God cards don't need the extra deck. Neither of these decks need the extra deck except Kashtira, and they don't need that much. We very rarely go into the extra deck with this deck, so running these cards in our main extra deck is actually definitely worth it, just like so we can side in Super Poly and go into game 2 if we need it. We already have these, we don't have to use up space for our side deck for something else. Next, for our Kashtira engine, we have our rank 7's Dark Arm, the Dragon of Annihilation. We have one number 11 Big Eye and one Kashtira Shangri-Ira. Unfortunately, the Kashtiras do not hit as hard without their main boss monster. Unfortunately, Arise Heart is now banned, which is very unfortunate, otherwise we would definitely include Arise Heart, but nonetheless, these cards are definitely powerful. Dark Armed is able to get rid of any of our opponent's cards, which is fantastic. Big Eye can steal our opponent's monsters, which is great and adds for tribute fodder, though it does cost 2 monsters, but it's fine. And of course, Shangri-Ira is always good. During each standby phase, you can special summon one Kashtira monster from your deck, and it also has the effect that each time a card your opponent owns and possesses is banished face down, you can choose one unused main monster zone or spell trap card zone, and it can't be used. So this goes off well with the Kashtiras. You know, I would often go into Shangri-Ira, it's 3000 defense. If you're going first, this is the way to go. If you're going second, you'll probably go into one of these, but going first, Shangri-Ira is definitely a good choice, though honestly, the Wicked Gods are a little bit stronger in this case, but he will get us out another Kashtira, which is always good. Finally, for our Xyz monsters, we have the newer Tistina, the divinity that defies darkness. Now, I realized for some reason in this Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulator, it has it listed as a rank 0, which I was hoping was true, because that is insanely cool, but it is a rank 10, which is unfortunate. Nonetheless, Tistina, the divinity that defies darkness, is a rank 10 monster, which, again, people did not give this the credit that it deserved when it came out. This card is incredible. If this card is special summoned, you can send all face-down cards your opponent controls to the graveyard. That is like everything that they own. If we use the effect of Demigod and Crystal God, we flip all their monsters face down, send all their face-up cards to the graveyard, and then we link into the divinity that defies darkness, and then just send their entire field to the graveyard. And then its other effect is that if it has Crystal God Tistina as material, you can detach one material and it gains 2000 attack until the end of your opponent's turn. And then, even more, if this card is destroyed by an opponent's card while it has material, you can special summon one Tistina monster from your graveyard, so that just resets. This card is fantastic, it's so good. So, especially with the Wicked God variant, in a normal Tistina variant, like I said, we have Hound to make us direct attack and go for the OTK. But with the God variant, this sends all of our opponent's cards to the graveyard, gives us a 4000 attack monster, and then your Wicked Avatar copies it to 4100, that's 8000 points of damage. And then even then you would fill up your field with the rest of your monsters anyway. This card is definitely fantastic to have as a one-off. Finally, for our Link monsters, we have Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, Access Code Talker, Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess, Nightmare Unicorn, Nightmare Phoenix, IP Masquerena, and Salamangreat Almirage. These are just all very standard cards. They're great cards to have in your extra deck, and it's very easy to go into these Link monsters as well when we have Sentinel and Hound who can keep reviving themselves, which is always just really great for Link summons. For our side deck, we have 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird because Droll, you gotta have it. We have 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster because this deck hates back row. We have 2 copies of Book of Moon. This deck does hate back row, but once we get our Wicked Avatar, that shuts off all of our opponent's back row anyway, which is just fantastic. 2 copies of Book of Moon because, you know, more Book of Moon is always good. 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. This deck really hates back row. 3 copies of Super Polymerization, and 3 copies of Evenly Matched, just in case this deck is quite often treated as a going second deck, though the Wicked God variant is very much a going first deck. But if we're going second, Evenly Matched, always good. So there you have it. That is my Wicked God Tistina deck. I'm telling you, this deck is crazy. Like, this deck is actually so... I am shocked at how well this worked out. This is the best Wicked God deck that I have ever seen, and I created it, and, you know, if I may say so myself, it's amazing. Alright, it's amazing. Test it for yourself and let me know how it goes down in the comments if you try this deck out. It's great, easily fills up your field, just controls the opponent. That's the main strategy. Get out Avatar, get out your God and your Demigod, and you'll be cooking. And on your second turn, go for the OTK. So easy. So easy. Like I said before, check out the card above if you would like to see this deck in action. Next week, we're going to be looking at another Wicked God deck. We're going to be looking at Yako Tenma's deck from the manga with manga-only cards, which should be a lot of fun. And then we're going to go into a couple more very interesting, very cool Wicked God decks that I think you guys will appreciate. So subscribe if you want to see that. Thank you for watching. My name is Ben Sinkara, and until next time, see ya.